The new independent mids. If you know skateboarding, you know that Independent is one of the most popular brands of trucks in skateboarding, and that it has as loyal of a fan base as any brand on the planet, even outside of skateboarding. Independent trucks started in 1978 and has devoted more than 40 years into making the best trucks for skateboarding. If Vans are skateboarding's historic shoe, then Independent is skateboarding's historic truck. So if you're a fan of skateboarding or independent trucks, I suggest doing a little research on its history. There are literally books on the subject. Okay, back to the mids. First off, what's a mid? Skateboard trucks are available in different size widths to fit different size decks, but they also come in different heights as well. Typically, truck heights are described as talls, mids, and lows. Talls are also sometimes called standards or highs. Independent calls their talls standards. A truck's height is measured by the distance from the center of the axle to the bottom of the base plate. The taller the trucks, the higher your deck is off the ground. Of course, that partly depends on how big your wheels are, or if you have riser pads. A tall truck is usually around 55 millimeters tall, a mid is around 52 millimeters tall, and a low around 50 millimeters tall. Also, you might notice that those heights match the wheel sizes that tend to fit well for that height truck. For example, if you have 55 millimeter wheels, you should probably get a truck 55 millimeters tall. Talls or standards are used on all types of different setups, whether it be a cruiser, a ramp park board, or a street setup. Whereas lows have historically had a specific type of technical skating purpose. They're usually meant for flip tricks, ledges, manuals, and you need smaller wheels or you'll wheel bite. If someone were new to skateboarding and walked into a skate shop and said, "I want to skate everything," the folks in the shop probably wouldn't suggest lows. So, why did Independent make the mids? I remember hearing that Indy was making a mid and thinking, why are you guys making a new truck? You have your truck perfected. To be honest, I didn't really understand what made the mids so special until I rode them. The objective of the Independent mids was to offer a lower height truck with a lower contact point without losing that signature Independent turn. What does a lower contact point mean? Simply put, it means it's easier to pop. The contact point is where your tail or nose hits the ground on ollies. Lower trucks lower your contact point so you don't have to tilt so deep to hit the tail. The higher the truck, the steeper the board has to tilt in order to hit that pop. Independent did this by lowering just the axle height in the hanger without compromising the turn. This may sound simple, but it wasn't. I ran a truck company for 17 years and I still don't understand all the nuances of skate truck geometry. I just wanted to make them look like wood. The Independent mids were about 4 years in the making, and the overall design has a patent pending. It was designed by Keith Wilson, former Indy brand manager. Now he helps with the development process of all of our skate products coming out of NHS. Big shout out to Keith Wilson, Gavin and Nike, Tim Pumarda, and our R&D department for smashing this one out the park.
See that truck. Wow.
How do they turn? Independent discovered the geometry of a proper skateboard turn a long time ago. There have been many stages over the years to refine that turn. In a way, the brand has really only had to compete with itself to keep the best version of that skateboard turn. To some skaters, it isn't which brand of trucks turn the best, it's which stage of Indies. The current standard Indies, the Stage 11s, were released in 2012 and were designed with decades of rider input and critique of all those previous stages in hopes to perfect that perfect Indy turn. Here it is, 8 years later, and the Stage 11 has had the longest run of any of the stages, and the Indy turn seems to be as beloved as ever. The new mids have the exact same geometry as the standard height Indies, so they turn just like the Stage 11s. The mids are 52 millimeters tall, and the standards are 55 millimeters tall, except of course any standard truck that has a forged base plate. Those are 53.5 millimeters tall because the forged base plate is a little bit thinner, and they all have that Stage 11 geometry. Also, I should mention that Indy made lows in 2013. Those were discontinued and Indy's not making them anymore. They were 48.5 millimeters tall, which is a classic example of a really low truck. When a truck is that low, the geometry has to be changed, which also slows down the turn. That's why really low trucks don't usually turn fast. Also, you had to ride pretty small wheels or else you'd wheel bites. I'm not trying to knock them. They work great for the select technicians they were designed for, but they didn't really retain that quick turn that Independent is known for. I was told that the new mids were designed with street skating in mind, with regards to that lower contact point and an easier popping aspect. I only hesitate to call them a street truck because that might imply that they aren't good for park and transition, which I thought they were really good for. Either way, they are designed to pop easier, and they really do that nicely. So I'd say it's not so much about the terrain you skate, as much as would you like your board to pop easier. I skated everything I normally would with these trucks, from curbs to bowls, flat grounds to flat bars, and I didn't feel like there was anything they weren't good for. The max wheel size recommended for the Indy mids is 53 millimeters. I've been riding 53s on the mids and I've had no problems with wheel bites. It's worked great. I think you could probably even go 54 millimeters unless you ride super loose trucks. For comparison, the max suggested wheel size for a standard Indy is around 55, 56 millimeters. So if you live your life on 55 or 56 millimeter wheels and you don't want riser pads, you might want to stick with the standard Indies. I think if I was going to put together a setup with wheels over 53 millimeters or a cruiser, I'd probably go with the standard height Indies. If you ride those bigger wheels and you really want to try the mids, you can totally just add risers. They're going to turn just the same as the standard Indies. They even have the same classic Indy orange cushions as the standard, so all the genuine parts cushions, hard, soft, conical, cylinder, will fit the mids as well. Now, let's talk about this Kingpin. It's an inverted Kingpin, meaning that it's upside down compared to a normal Kingpin, and the nut is down in the base plate instead of being up top. This makes it so the Kingpin can sit lower and have this nice rounded top. The lower Kingpin height makes up for the lowering of the axle in the hanger design. If you had a mid with a regular Kingpin, it would stick out and definitely get in the way of tricks like Smith grinds. The design doesn't make it so low that you never touch the Kingpin, but it's that roundedness that really helps out with grinds where the Kingpin comes into play, like Smiths and Feebs. This isn't the first time a truck has had an inverted Kingpin. Grind King, Crux, Royal, and other companies have done it before, but they never had this. The shaft nut. Most inverted Kingpins end up wiggling over time, since the Kingpin isn't really being held in place by the base plate. If your Kingpin can move when your trucks turn, you aren't getting the full turn out of your trucks. The shaft nut is machine pressed into the base plate, and the inverted Kingpin screws right into the shaft nut, so there's no wiggle. And like that, the inverted Kingpin game has been changed. Big shout out to NHS R&D legend Tim Pumarta for developing the shaft nut. I had the pleasure of being one of the test pilots of the shaft nut, and it's fun just to say shaft nut. It worked great. I never had any problems with my Kingpins wiggling, tightening, or loosening. And thanks to that rounded top, I never got hung up on any Feebles or Smiths unless it was totally my fault. I think with tricks like Smiths and Feebles or any trick where that Kingpin area is involved, if you don't get into the grind absolutely perfect, there's a moment where you hit the Kingpin. If you slide to the correct side and you're locked in the grind, you're good to go. With a regular Kingpin, it can dig in like an anchor, you hear that high-pitched chirp, and next thing you know, you're swimming through the air. With the inverted Kingpin, I noticed a couple times where I got into it on the wrong side, and I could feel the Kingpin touch the flat bar. Instead of it grabbing and stopping me, my truck slid back over to the right side, and I kept on grinding. I could actually feel it work like it's supposed to. Pretty amazing. The Mids Kingpin head lets you use a regular 9/16 skate tool to tighten it, and it also has an Allen head that is 5.5 millimeters in size. It's nice to have those two options to tighten or loosen. Also, for those of you who want the Kingpin but prefer a standard height Indy truck, this spring, Independent will be selling the inverted Kingpin and shaft nut base plate combo by themselves. Then you can use the inverted Kingpin on any size Indy we currently make. So look for those around March. Or you can just get the mids now and use risers. Again, there are options. Here's the set I skated. When I first put them on, I noticed how sharp the turning was. Independent is known for their quick turn, so it's no surprise since it's the same geometry as the normal Stage 11s. The bushings felt a little soft at first, so I was trying to be careful not to wheel bite. I weigh about 200 pounds, and I was a little worried that the cushions might be too soft and they'd feel too loose. About 10 minutes later, I forgot I was even getting used to new trucks and was just wrapped up in the trick I was trying. After about half a session, they felt all broken in, and after a few days, I even loosened them up a little bit. So I got the 159s, 8.75 inches wide. I have a Creature 8.8 inch stump and 53 millimeter Easy Edge OJ wheels. I've never had a board that was so wide, with trucks so wide, that flipped so easily and felt so light. It's funny, but I looked up the weight difference between the standards and the mids when I was going to mention how light they feel. I was looking to see how much less they weigh and discovered they actually weigh a little bit more than the standards. That's because it's essentially the same parts as a standard, the same base plate, a similar hanger design, and the same materials, but with that added shaft nut in the base plate. The shaft nut takes up some of the space that was aluminum base plate. Steel weighs more than aluminum, so the mids weigh a little bit more than the standard. If you're thinking, why doesn't the Kingpin just screw into the aluminum base plate? Aluminum is too soft of a metal, and even though it grinds great, it would strip, hence the steel shaft. The fact that they're a little heavier than the standard really surprised me because in my opinion, they felt lighter in the way they perform. I think part of it is hitting that contact point earlier, so your board pops easier, but it's also where that steel axle and shaft weight is placed. Since the mids bring the weight of that axle in a little bit closer, and any extra weight from the shaft nut is right in the middle, the flipping axis of your skateboard is right where you want it, in the center. So they aren't actually any lighter, but they feel lighter and skate lighter thanks to a well thought out design. Think of it like this. If you had a light skinny board with really heavy wheels, when you do a kickflip, the lighter skateboard deck is going to spin around the heavy wheels. If you have a heavier deck and light wheels, the deck will be the center point and the lighter wheels will spin around the deck. It's like when all your clothes get stuck on one side of the washing machine. That spin cycle starts, and next thing you know, the washer is dancing around the laundry room like it's possessed because it's off balance. You can have the same amount of clothes in there, but if they're dispersed evenly on the sides, or even better, near the center, the washing machine spins smooth. In the middle of the skateboard washing machine that we call a kickflip. Next summer, Andrew Reynolds has a Pro Mid coming out with a hollow axle. Those will be as light as the standard Stage 11. I'm guessing those will feel crazy light. Also look out for mid-forged hollows and mid-forged titaniums coming out in 2021. They will have a forged base plate. The forged base plate is a little thinner, making them 50.5 millimeters, closer to that traditional low truck height. Mids are available in 129, 139, 144, 149, and 159 sizes, which cover decks from 7.4 inches wide to a little over 9 inches wide. No plans to make 101s, 169s, or 215s in mid-height. Not too long ago, Indy started adding the size numbers underneath the hanger. As you can see, the new mids have that M, so you can tell the difference between a standard and a mid. At 8.75 inches wide, the 159s are the widest mids. Other truck companies make trucks that wide, but they're all standard height. In that way, the 159s are special as far as a wider and lower truck. I know the Independent has had a lot of requests for a lower truck in the wider sizes, like 149 and 159. Ask and you shall receive. So I skated mine for a good 2 months. I wish I would have gotten to the axle, but I think my shred cred is still valid. Put a hurting on that yoke making the rail video though. The curb was really rough and angled on both sides, and I kept hitting it. Another benefit from a lower truck height, when you're doing board slides, it gives you a little bit more clearance from the ground with your wheels, similar to how rails add a little bit of that wheel clearance as well. You put the two together and you're smooth sliding. Did a lot of Feebles, really trying to feel the Kingpin do its thing. did its thing. So if you're interested in the independent mids, but aren't quite sure yet, I would ask you 3 questions. Would you like your board to pop easier? Would you like a Kingpin you don't have to worry about snagging on grinds? Do you ride wheels under 54 millimeters? If you answered yes to these questions, I think you'll like them. Excellent trucks. I give them an A for sure. So if you've never tried Indies, or you're an Indy skater who's interested in trying the new mids, I think you'll be very pleased. If you know me, you might know I skate Crux. I have since 1991, and I always will. Just thought I should mention for my Crux people, I didn't quit Crux, and I was hoping that maybe this would provide a different perspective in this video of the Indy mids, as opposed to the die-hard Indy skater. Thanks for watching. I hope you get in some fun skating over the holidays, and we'll see you next time.